Yes, sir. Good morning, everyone. How are you today?
Doing
Hope
good. How you doing?
Good, Rich.
doing doing fine. Hope everybody's doing well today. Today we're going to talk about writing exposition and action, which is to me a Mike Malai plus. He does it very well. Um, I do not do it as well as him, but he does it very well. But I'll start it off, and I'm sure he'll add some great stuff to it. So exposition is very important in script writing because your description and is really the essential background information that an audience, a reader, a producer, an audience needs to understand your story, your characters, what you created. It's really the foundation of your script. So here's a really breakdown. Here's a breakdown of why it's crucial and it's important in your script. So your descriptions of in your screenplay, it establishes your context, right? Exposition really explains your who, what, where, and why. Under what circumstances things are happening, where your story begins. So you have, your interior, exterior, where the scene's taking place, and then you have your description, where things are taking place, your character, descriptions. It explains your context. Without this context, the actions, the events that are happening, it gets very confusing, especially to readers and to actors who are reading your scripts, to prop people who are reading your scripts, to anybody who's reading your scripts. So that's the first one. It establishes context. Second one, it introduces your characters and the relationships, and this is where Mike really great at. Um, it helps you feel who the characters are in your script, what their motivations are, what their backstories are, how they relate to one another, one another, one another. Understanding the dynamics is vital for the audience to really connect to and grasp their intentions. You want to explain number three?
Sure. And actually that's probably one of my favorite things is creating the backstory and making it flow how that character talks back and forth. You're right. I love doing that. I mean, that's kind of the fun part of it all, is building personas, building the personality of that character too. Especially with a, fictitious character. Because, we bring a little bit of ourselves and our friends into every character. So it's kind of fun to do it. And then when you lay down your parameters and you say, hey, we're putting this backstory together, and how does character A relate to character C? So that is the fun stuff. So three explains about the central conflict and the stakes that are at hand. Exposition usually lays out the problem, and of course your inciting incident that kicks off the whole main plot. It clarifies, what the stakes are for the protagonist and other characters. Um, it also is what they stand to gain or what they stand to lose. Understanding what makes the audience care about the outcome. It's like trying to establish that, because bottom line is that's who you're writing for, is that person sitting in those seats, whether it's in the living room or in a theater. So also it builds worlds, so um, especially in genres like science fiction, fantasy, historical dramas, ex ex exposition is super important to explain the rules, the history, the social structures, even if it's a fictitious story, all those unique elements of the world that you're creating. Because even if it is a historical story, especially further back as you can go, other than the documented history part of it, you still have to create that world, all the elements that go to it. So world building is another fun part of it, because you also have to make it believable and immersive. That even comes into gaming, especially in gaming. It's like for those that are gamers out there, you know, you think of the worlds that everything from Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto, Fallout. Fallout's got an incredible world. I love that. I don't play games, but I watch the kids play it. Our kids, and they've even got a TV series now too, which just followed all the rules. And
My
it's
son is way into Fallout, like big time.
what's that?
My son is into Fallout big time.
Yeah, I love I loved walking through the sets in the on the video game. You know, it's just like anything that was trying to engage me. It was like, hey, come on, attack me. But it's like it's the colors, the feel, the music, from version one has always been great. So, number five, understanding and engagement. Ultimately, the effect of exposition, makes the audience make sure that the audience isn't lost. When viewers understand the whole basic framework of your story, they can become invested emotionally. The character's journey, the unfolding plot, you know, and just remember, if your viewer gets confused, it kind of disengages them and they lose interest. And hey, I'm clicking on to something else. So the challenge you know, is delivering effectively, delivering exposition effectively. You know, poorly handled, it can feel like a dump of information. Unnatural. Boring, spoon-fed. Like narration stops the story sometimes too, especially when it's boring. So it good screenwriting takes exposition organically into into the action and into dialogue, revealing information, little by little, naturally, so that the story progresses and it keeps you engaged. Like Rich's mantra: "Show, don't tell." Mike, shut up. Write it.
Show
Don't
us,
say
just
it.
show us. When you're writing action, it's very important to really write in the present tense. Screenplays, and I always say this with improv scenes too, it's very boring to write. Don't write about the past. When you do an improv scene, stay in the now. But when you're writing a screenplay, everything the audience watches should be in the now. Like when you're writing your action, keep it in in the present tense. Keep it simple. So he use a simple present tense. Example: he walks, she opens, the car speeds. Avoid past tense. He walked, he is walking.
Yeah.
Example: John kicks the door open. It flies off its hinges. Not John kicked the door open. It flew off its hinges. Be concise and be clear. They're screenplays of blueprints. They're not novels. Get straight to the point. Avoid overly flowery language, complex sentence structures. Every word should. This is where Mike is great. Every sentence should serve a purpose, and they should be no more than 3 or 4 lines each for action. Really, it should be. It improves readability, pacing. When people are reading your scripts, it's a visual art. Nobody wants to read a paragraph of action. Nobody. Less is more. It's just
Yep.
less is more. You know.
Absolutely. And, going to that point, what you're saying, Rich, too. Um, there was a couple of scripts that got sent to me about redoing it, and I think, geez, there's 130 pages here. Actually, that 130 pages was probably about 90 pages, because the way that the writer was writing it was exactly the way you were saying it. Jim
Mhm.
opened the door, he comes running in. Jim runs in, grabs Linda. They dive towards the window, and they're each separate lines. The window shatters. They fall out to the street. They land on the awning. That's like one, two, three, four, five. That would all be tightened up, for a
Yeah.
shoot. But that's getting the point, because that guy's a filmmaker, and that's why he was writing it that way, because he's writing it for himself. But it is very direct. This. It's almost like a shot list, but it's still
Right.
got that story out.
Right.
Very dialogue light, and it was really nice. It was set to shoot in Austria, but it was just very dialogue uh, light, and the writer was Jim Agnew, who you know from Game of Death.
Hmm.
Was just It was just how much his style has changed over the years, but he was also writing for the filmmaker.
Well, which is different, right?
Yeah.
Besides being concise and clear, focus on sight and sound. Write only what can be seen and heard on screen. Don't include internal thoughts or feelings, backstory, or motivations in your action lines, because that's the actors and directors' job to interpret. That's not your job to write. That's just not your job to write. Again, show, don't tell. Instead of writing Sarah feels nervous, describe her action. Okay, that's
Bite
what
her
it's
nails,
about.
stressed.
Yeah, it's not about that's not your job. That's the actor's director's job and the actor's job. Important sounds are often capitalized. A loud bang, bang should be capitalized. The phone rings, glass shatters is capitalized. But use this sparingly for emphasis. You don't want to, again, because that's almost like a stage direction. Be very careful with that. Be very careful with that. You want to use active voice. An active voice is generally more direct and engaging than a passive voice. Example of an active voice is uh, Maria throws the vase. Example of a passive, less effective was the vase is thrown by Maria. It's just how you use your words that are going to connect with a reader or an actor reading your script. It's really important. You want to connect with people. So the way you use the English language is important. You know, be specific with your verbs and your nouns. You want to explain that, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, just like you just said, instead of walks, consider strides. Instead of, you know,
Mm,
shuffles, stomps, creeps. Instead of gun, consider revolver, shotgun, laser pistol. It's more visual. He goes less specific. He goes to the table and gets the thing. You know, more specific. He lunges for the table and snatches the antique dagger. So that's more clear. Formatting. It's
mm.
like, introduce the characters always in all caps. That's one thing. That way, anybody on that set, everyone from continuity people to wardrobe to the PAs, you see that thing. Hey, the guy is coming into the film for the very first time. Jimmy. Jimmy's in all caps. So that way it's again, it's the blueprint, like you said, and that way everybody knows from the director to the PA. Um, you know, the first time they appear, sometimes too in the action description, they're often a little brief defining characteristic if it's needed. It might have been communicated from the director to the actor where it wasn't necessary to actually put it into the script. But that was also communicated to wardrobe and everything else, his look, his feel, and all that. So Detective Miller, 50s, weary, but sharp. After that, use, his regular name, Miller. You don't have to keep saying Detective Miller unless there's two Millers, which you want to avoid anyway.
Right, you want to avoid that anyway. And
Yeah.
we always give every character a name, even if instead of customer one has a name.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because
It's always good to have a name.
every person in real life has a name. Well, that drives us insane. And also remember that everyone who has a job is going to read your script.
Yeah.
So the clearer you are, like Mike just said, an antique dagger is going to help the prop person know what they need instead of just saying lunges for the thing. It's a big difference for that person to help do their job, which believe it or not is going to save a lot of time that she doesn't have to go to the first AD or the director like, what kind of thing do you want? Just make it just saves time. It's just as clear as you could be. You have no idea how that helps people. It helps the reader. It goes all the way back. Helps the
Yeah.
reader, helps the director, helps the producer, helps the actors. I mean, it just saves everyone time. Be
And,
clear.
and it's key to budgeting when you're tagging items so that item would be tagged, for the line producer that he'll see in there, hey, I need to find an antique dagger, or at least one that looks like one. If not, we'll 3D print it with the prop guy. This is what
Right.
we need. And then they'll give it to the art director, and the art director will come up with some ideas for that dagger.
Yeah.
Especially if it's integral to the story.
Yeah. I mean,
Like it was for the Hunter. They had a specific sword and shield in that film that they needed, and so they replicated the one that's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. That's priceless. that each one of those items, I mean, for sure, it's being specific.
Good action writing, when you're doing that, it's economical, it's visual, it's auditory. It uses, remember, present tense, active voice. That's what you're looking to do. Be specific with your verbs and your nouns. Be active. Take your time with it. It's really important. And when you go do your rewrites, that's one of the things you really want to go over. How can you tighten that up? Remember, we talked about rewrites. Those are the kind of things you want to look for. So it's a craft of precision and clarity. And it really, that's your job. That's one of your jobs. And I don't think writers really think of it that way, but it really is a big part of your job.
And that's another thing too. It's just to be clear, when Rich says, speak in the present, that doesn't mean you can't do a flashback, and say, hey, back in the day. So you go back in the day and begin flashback, and then the title over back in the day.
But then you still go. But then you still.
Jimmy walks into the room.
Right. Still goes back to the present. Yeah. Right.
Right. Just to clarify that.
Quick question.
Yeah.
I see smash cuts being very popular, of course. How do you see that playing into some of the things you talked about in terms of, where you cut from somebody's facial expression to the next scene? Do you see any interface with that?
It's the same thing. If you're using a smash cut, just make sure once you're writing it that once you write smash cut and you go into your description that it's in the present.
I mean, if it's necessary, you use it. Otherwise, it's like to do it for the sake of a smash cut. No, but like if you say, okay, Bob looks at Jimmy, he grimaces for a moment. There's silence on the screen. You see him in thought. He's thinking. It's silent. He's looking like that, and then boom, your thought flashback. He thinks he remembers what Jimmy did to him at one point. He's thinking about that. That was 20 years ago. So it shows that fight and that, and all of a sudden he comes, hey, how's it going? Comes up there. But that gave the audience why he made that face, and you showed it. He didn't say anything about it, doesn't bring it up to him, but now you know his underlying why he has a disdain for Jimmy. So if it propels the story,
I was just gonna say that smash cuts, anything, flashbacks, as long as it helps the story move forward. If that's your last resort, then use it, unless that's unless your whole movie is based on that, which is fine. Which is absolutely fine. It's not a problem at all. No shame in that. It's great. Goodfellas, I'm not a voiceover guy, but voiceover in that movie works beautifully. I would write a movie like that for sure.
And everybody tried to copy that with narration. It's just like they did it for the sake of that's the story. He's telling them,
Somewhere in Time was pretty good, like a story inside of a story that was in the past, but those time ones are kind of different though, right? That's like a whole genre.
Yeah.
And I say read those scripts. Go to simplyscripts.com, as writers, and read those. All those scripts are available for free. Read them. See how they're written. See the way they're formatted. Read how they do them.
If you don't find it at Simply Scripts, go to Internet Movie Script Database. I am SDB.com. Internet Movie Script Database.
So hopefully this helped you guys find a little bit about what also is your job, and that is definitely writing your descriptions and your and some formatting and all that kind of stuff. So that's our lesson for today.
Really interesting. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Great topic again.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you.